Namaskara. So today the session basically focuses about analysis, interpretation and testing of hypothesis. In the previous presentation, I've been discussed about various types of testing of hypothesis, and prior to that I focused more on the research process followed by how to formulate an hypothesis and linking hypothesis with the research objectives. However, the today's presentation basically focuses about testing of hypothesis in empirical study. As we know, research can be carried in two ways. One is a theoretical study where the research can explore the hidden fact, and the second thing, the research can also be in empirical where a researcher can conduct research by using real world data, and by analyzing it he can come to a conclusion, and the conclusion can be useful for further decision making. Hence, keeping these two views in mind, the presentation is taking care of how a hypothesis can be tested by using some of the empirical studies of the real world data. However, testing of hypothesis is a vast area where there are many statistical tools can be applied to test the varieties of hypotheses. Due to the constraint of time, each and every possible variant of testing of hypothesis cannot be conducted in the present presentation. However, the fundamental testing of hypothesis, which used extensively in real research, is focused primarily in this presentation. Before coming to the testing of hypothesis through empirical data, let's look into the statistical data analysis. As we know, based upon the purpose of the study as a research question, the researcher will collect the data. Whenever data is available through numerical form, I mean to say in a quantitative form, the quantity data can be analyzed in a different way, in a different angle and different point of view. Based on the available data, the researcher is always carried different concepts or different tools, where the most widely used simple way of a data analysis is descriptive statistics. Under descriptive statistics, researcher is keen to focus more on describing the situation or a phenomena with available data. So for instance, let's say the researcher has collected about the income of the some of the respondents. Now, let's say the researcher has collected data of nearly 100 respondents whose income, whose age, and other demographic characteristics and other research-based questions has been pulled from the field. Now the question here, since there are 100 number of samples, the 100 number of respondents, each and every 100 number of respondents will be having the different levels of income. Now how a researcher can summarize this 100 samples income so that the summary can be used for further making analysis, further making decision as well, for sake of comparison for the present study to some other study. In that case, we require a statistical tool. The tool can help us to summarize the information in a lucid and a simplified way, so that the summarization information can be used in a comparative analysis, in a comparative study, as well as summarized information can be used even for a purpose of policy making decision. Therefore, how a researcher can summarize? So, for the sake of summarization of data, so one can use descriptive statistics. Yes, the descriptive statistics basically comes to handy to the researcher to describe the phenomena or to summarize the phenomena what the data which is a researcher has in his hand. So under summarization of data or under descriptive statistics, there are different way a researcher can summarize. So in fundamental form of a statistics, what we generally say, measure of central tendency. The measure of central tendency is one of the primarily used statistical tool to describe the phenomena or to describe the study or to summarize the statistical data. So the central tendency is popularly also known as nothing but averages, because the average, what we say in a layman approach, in a general sense, it is nothing but central tendency. So under average, again we have different varieties of averages. So namely the mathematical averages like arithmetic mean, geometric mean and harmonic mean, and as well the positional averages like median and mode. These five types of averages which is used for the sake of summarizing the data. Along with this, the people also use like combined averages and semi averages, moving averages. These are also different types of averages, but the purpose of using those averages varies depending upon the type of analysis or the kind of analysis the researcher is carrying in his field. Now coming to one point, the central tendency is basically used for the sake of summarizing the data, in which the central tendency is nothing but which help us to represent the data through a single value. Central tendency is nothing but a statistical tool, one of the form of the descriptive statistics which help us to represent the data through a single value. And central tendencies are popularly known as averages. Under averages, we have two types of averages. One is simple mathematical averages and followed by geometric positional averages. Under mathematical averages, so we have arithmetic mean, geometric mean and harmonic mean. Under positional averages, we have median as well as mode. In this way, a researcher can use either mathematical averages, either positional averages, depending upon the kind of assumption the data is actually fulfilling to represent the data. This is one set of descriptive statistics a researcher can use. The second set of descriptive statistics is basically the measure of dispersion, or what we generally call as measure of variation. So dispersion, so I can say is nothing but dispersion. Or variation. So at outset, central tendency is basically help us to represent the data through a single value, whereas the dispersion which help us to measure the amount of variation in the data set. Because when I try to represent the 100 persons, 100 responses income through a single value, the single value does which represents the data. However, the problem will be that within the 100 people, all people will not be having uniform income. All people will not be having identical income. Therefore, within sample of 100, so let us classify the 100 samples into this number of 100 samples into two groups. One is the residents who are locating in the urban area, the residents who are locating in rural area. So I have a data of 100 samples. Out of these 100 samples, some of the respondents are basically from urban area, some of the respondents are basically from rural area. Now, if I use arithmetic mean to represent the data, yes, average can be used to represent the income of all 100 people. So including urban, including rural together. But the issue will be that within urban, within rural, or within urban, within rural, which residents' income has more of variation. So that's what actually we want to measure. Therefore, X bar, a so-called central tendency, which just gives you average income of overall 100, or average income of urban, or average income of rural. Average income of urban, average income of rural, or else overall average income. But it does not speak about the amount of variation within the data set. Why do we need an amount of variation? Because so when I take in a classroom, some student may score 100 out of 100, some student may score 30 out of 100. So if you compare the students who are actually scoring highest marks and students who are scoring lowest marks, between these two there are too much of variation in data. So between these two there will be too much of variation in the performance of students. Now the question will be, we want to mitigate the variation in the data set. Therefore, to mitigate the variation in the data set, one should have a numerical measure, a numerical value which help us to which help us to capture the magnitude of dispersion or magnitude of variation. Therefore, the dispersion is a statistical tool which help us to measure the amount of variation within the data set. Under dispersion, there are many concepts or many tools one can use for the sake of measuring the dispersion. So popularly we will use one of the simplest way of measuring the dispersion is the range. Just by using range one can measure dispersion. So under dispersion again we have range. Under dispersion we can use quartile deviation to measure the amount of variation. Again under dispersion we can use mean deviation to measure the variation, as well as we can also use variance and standard deviation. So variance and standard deviation both are also a type of method of measure of dispersion. So now range, quartile deviation, mean deviation, variance or standard deviation, all these are purely mathematical method of measure of dispersion. However, dispersion is also can be measured by using geometrical method. The geometrical method of measuring the dispersion is known as Lorentz curve. Very popularly is known as Lorentz curve. So now one can use any one of this method of measure of dispersion. Either one can use range to measure the variation in the data, I mean to say dispersion, or one can also use quartile deviation, mean deviation or standard deviation. But a call has to take by the researcher which is most appropriate. If you want to measure a simple way of dispersion, simple tools of measuring the dispersion, we can rely on range. However, I want to measure the variation in a more mathematically more lucid form. So to measure the volatility in the stock prices or commodity prices like that. So then we can move on to the advanced method of measure of dispersion called as standard deviation. Like it is up to the the researcher call what type of method of dispersion he can employ to measure the dispersion. So for a simple study he can go for range. For a for a complex study he can go for using standard deviation as a method of dispersion. This is also one of the type of descriptive statistics. So now coming to the next part of descriptive statistics. Next part of descriptive statistics is nothing but our so-called more popularly known as measure of skewness and kurtosis. Skewness and kurtosis, we call them as actually method of distribution. Simply in a single word, if one want to say, so we can say it as measure of distribution. So but rather saying as a measure of distribution, we can mention which are the tool which we use as method of measure of distribution. Under measure of distribution we have skewness and kurtosis. The skewness and kurtosis is to measure. So a researcher can use for the sake of measuring the distribution. So now the question arises here: why do we have to measure about the distribution? Why has to do for measuring the distribution? So the one of the underlying concept here, any researcher in any field, when he has a data which is pulled from field study, the data which follows some underlying pattern, underlying distribution. The underlying pattern vary depending upon the kind of data that he has. Sometimes actually the data can have a uniformity, sometimes the data can be have a homogeneity, sometimes the data can be also have a heterogeneity. Like whenever there is sometimes even data will be having lot of outliers also. So unless without knowing the kind of characteristic, without knowing the pattern of data set which I have it in my hand, so the further analysis cannot be carried out. I mean to say in a very simple sense, in a simple terminology, whether the data which has collected from the field which follows some of the underlying distribution. What are the underlying distribution? In statistics there are a lot of theories which describes the different attributes of the real world data, real world phenomena. So for example, if I take IQ of the students or IQ of the persons in a particular locality or in a particular classroom, the IQ of the students in a particular classroom, in a particular school, if you take an example, where all students may not be intelligent, all students may not be highly meritorious. In same way, all students may not be also dull or fools. So that when you observe the students, obviously each and every student's IQ will be different from each other, wherein you will not find out of 100 students may not be meritorious. In a similar way, out of 100 may not be the fool kind of students. So the IQ of the students will be follows in a very simple bell-shaped form. So we can say a bell-shaped form. So what does it mean? It means that the probability of the students who are having low IQ, the probability of students who are having average IQ, the probability of students who are having high IQ. So when you say this, obviously the students with a low IQ you can find in a class in a lesser proportion. The student with high IQ you can also find them in a lower proportion. However, the students with an average IQ will be found in a class in a larger magnitude. Like the distribution goes like a bell shape, the histogram type of a bell shape. So therefore, this IQ distributed normally, I can say. So the IQ of the students in a class which distributed in a normal form. Therefore, when I collect data of any particular school where the students IQ is measured, I should know whether the data which I have collected does follows normal distribution or not. Once when I ensure that the data which follows normal distribution, then further analysis can be carried out based upon the assumptions of normal distribution. If not, I cannot use the tools which is basically based on the assumptions of normal distribution. Like the way in statistics, whatever data we have, before doing any further analysis, I should ensure that the data in my hand, does it follows any underlying distribution or a pattern. Once if it is fulfills the attributes of the underlying distribution, then I can use the tools and technique which on par with that particular distribution. But how do I ensure whether my data actually follows normal distribution, whether my data follows binomial distribution, whether my data follows Poisson distribution, hypergeometrical distribution? Again, there are many tools we will apply to identify or to ensure that the data follows some underlying distribution. Whereas to identify or to ensure the data follows normal distribution, we use these two tools. I mean to say the skewness and kurtosis. These two are the very popular statistical tools which help us to ensure whether my data, whether my distribution follows normal or not. Therefore, the skewness and kurtosis play a vital role, a pivotal role to ensure or to check whether the data follows normal distribution or not. Therefore, before using any statistical tools or techniques, I should ensure the distribution, I should ensure whether it follows normal or not by using skewness and kurtosis. These are the three concepts I discussed at a preliminary set. So again, in a nutshell, if I can brief it, descriptive statistics are those statistical tools which help us to describe the existing phenomena through empirical data. Under descriptive statistics, there are three variants we use more popularly in statistical or in empirical research. They are central tendency, dispersion, and distribution. Under central tendency, our central tendencies are popularly known as averages. Under central tendency, we have two types. One is mathematical averages and positional averages. Again, under mathematical averages, we have arithmetic mean, geometric mean, harmonic mean, and under position averages, we have median as well as mode. All these five types of averages are help us to represent the used data through a single value, so to which we can summarize the information in a simple form. This is the gist of the central tendency. Now moving to the dispersion. Dispersion is also a type of descriptive statistics which help us to measure the variability or a amount of variation within the data set. To measure the variation within the data set, we can use simple tools like a range, quartile deviation, mean deviation, or else we can also use some of the advanced or some of the highly mathematical kind of dispersion, that is nothing but variance or standard deviation. Even under dispersion, we also have mathematical measure of dispersion, that is nothing but Lorentz curve. Now, in a nutshell, the dispersion is a statistical tool which helps us to measure the variability or variation. Now coming to the distribution. all statistical tools based on some underlying assumption. Before applying any statistical tool, I should ensure my data follows which type of underlying pattern or underlying theory or underlying distribution. Therefore, to check the assumptions of the theoretical distribution, the skewness and kurtosis is most popularly used. Therefore, skewness and kurtosis also help us to describe the data in terms of distribution, how it is distributed, whether it is distributed normally or non-normally. So these are the some of the gist or some of the brief tools of descriptive statistics. Now coming to the point of the second part of our statistical data analysis, that is inferential statistics. Now my question is again, now let me start with the same n equals to 100, where n equals to 100 is nothing but a data which I have collected from the field. Now I will be raising some of the fundamental research question to this data. Now as a researcher with a critical mindset, with a research intuition, so we'll be having some of the underlying question or interesting question, like I have data of 100 samples. The 100 sample average income I have measured it as the 100 people, their average income data. So let's say the average income equals to 20,000. Now the question to me that, so the average income I got it as 20,000. The 20,000 average income what I have, so now it gives me some insight, that is on average the 100 samples, so they are having 20,000 income. Now my question is, does this 20,000 income is representative or not? Or else, let me say in a simple terminology, other research study, so some other research study is already conducted and it says that entire state average income, like average income is 12,000. Let us assume hypothetically 12,000. Now my question is, what the data I have collected from 100 samples, their average income is 20,000, but overall state average income is 12,000. Does it mean that the sample average income is significantly higher than the state per capita income or state average income? So now this average of my sample, like this average is nothing but the 100 sample average income, whether this is significantly higher than the average income of the state as a whole. Now this is where actually I am just checking, because this 100 people who have an average income of 20,000, because of sampling variation, if I take some 100 sample from the same field from different sample, then obviously this 20,000 may vary. Therefore I should ensure that this 20,000 is significantly higher than the 12,000, even if you change the sample. So even by making the sampling variation also, if a 20,000 or average income of the locality, if it is significantly higher than the average income of the state as a whole, then definitely you can say that the locality you have chosen is better in terms of their purchasing power than the state as a overall. Now this is what actually I want to examine. So now I am posing a question that, does the average income of the locality is significantly higher than the average income of the state as a whole? If it is higher than the state average income, then I can say that the study which I conducted, which has a purchasing power which is more than the state as a whole. So now how should I test this? How I can actually come to a conclusion? How to examine this kind of a statement? So to examine this kind of a statement, what we generally do, we move on to the inferential statistics. Inferential statistics basically help us to infer or help us to draw a conclusion based on some of the empirical data from your field by using sampling variation concept. Therefore, so whatever descriptive statistics which tells you, it is not sufficient, because descriptive statistics like average income, which gives you just a summary form, but the summary form may not be able to tackle you even if you change the sample, does the value reliable, does the results can be reliable. So that you cannot be able to draw from descriptive statistics. Therefore, once after measuring the descriptive statistics, a researcher always will move on to inferential statistics, because what the conclusion he can draw based on the inferential statistics, he can easily write the conclusion. Because even if you change the sample, the results what you have obtained may have a tendency of reliability, because you have done with your inferential statistics that take into consideration of sample variation, what we consider as standard error in our inferential statistics. In this way, so descriptive statistics, one side which help you to describe the data, whereas inferential statistics which help you to infer the information or help you to draw the conclusion. So this is the brief nutshell, brief description about descriptive as well as inferential statistics. Now move on to the next level. So what are the fundamental research questions you may have, and what are the which are the appropriate statistical tool one can use. So this is actually we have discussed in the previous session. However, just linking to the inferential statistics, again I am repeating over here. So if a researcher has a tendency to find the degree of relationship among the variable, he can use a tool of a correlation or a regression or a path analysis. Again, the regression or a correlation, even it is a simple or a multiple regression or a path analysis, all are able to measure the relationship among the variable, but they have a different connotation and they play different roles in each and every segment of their own assumption as well as application. Like path analysis, basically there is no issue of so one can use a path analysis to measure the causal relationship, measure the interdependency relationship, whereas in multiple regression which will help us to only measure the relationship of dependency. So one cannot use regression to measure the interdependency, whereas in path analysis, yes, we can portray in terms of graphically as well as the relationship among the variable one can portray in the graphically, as well as one can also measure interdependency among the variables. So I mean to say, I want to measure does x causes y or x has influence on y. So y is a function of x. Let's assume that y depends upon x. So whenever there is a change in x, that causes change in y also. Then I can say that y depends upon x, and one can represent the relationship between y and x in terms of linear functional form, like y equals to so beta plus beta naught plus beta 1 xi. So where one can represent x causes or x is influencing y in terms of linear function form, y equals to beta naught plus beta 1 xi. So this is what we say simple regression. Now if there are some other values of some other variable which also causes z, y, then let us introduce one more variable like z. So now if I introduce one more variable z, then I can expand my model like a b2z. Now if I assume that x causes y, then our x is having influence on y, I can say only a simple regression. Whereas x and z both are having influence on y, then I can expand my model from beta naught plus beta 1 x1 to xi to beta 2 to zi. So now both x as well as z which are causing y. So now it will be nothing but multiple regression. Whereas in multiple regression and simple regression, so you cannot take x causing y but not vice versa. I mean to say, you cannot assume if x causing y, if x has influence on y, you cannot take two directional relationship like y is also cause x. That relationship one cannot measure. Whereas in path analysis, whether in some other structural equation model, you can also like x causes y, in turn y causes z, and y also causes some other variable. Like all such a kind of a causal relationship one can measure in path analysis, so that what is not possible in regression, where one variable, other variable, so like interdependency, so that and all actually one can measure either in the path analysis, either in the structural equation model. So this is the tool one can use in a research. Whereas to test the inferential statistics by simple way like a t-test, too we can go till the last complex analysis like a factorial Markova. And to predict the membership, I mean to say, so I want to predict something which belongs to this group or something which belongs to this group. So like such a kind of a research question can be answered by using discriminant analysis as well as logistic regression. And also, as I was previously I was saying that structural equation model, but preliminary to the structural equation model, I want to know the hidden data structure in the model, hidden pattern in the data structure. So to identify the hidden pattern in the data structure at dimensions, So one can use a factor analysis as a principal component analysis. In this way, these are the different type of statistical tool one can use. So depending upon the kind of research question a researcher has to answer. So for example, if a researcher has to answer a relationship among the variable, then the correlation, regression, path analysis and even structural equation model one can use. If a researcher wants to draw conclusion to compare the two groups or compare the more than two groups depending upon some criterion variable, you can use a simple analysis, a simple inference statistics like a t-test, or you can move on to tell a factorial Markova. Again, a researcher, if he has intention to identify the whether a particular object goes to this group or a particular object belongs to that group, one can use a discriminant analysis or logistic regression. Then moving to the next research question, if a researcher wants to reduce the dimensionality of the data, because data can be huge, so you cannot use each and every data points, so that for the sake of a manageable, for the sake of handy employing the data in the further analysis, we wish to reduce the data, we wish to reduce the dimension of the data, not the data, dimension of the data. If a researcher wish to reduce the dimensionality of the data without losing much of the information, so he can employ factor analysis or else a principal component analysis. These are the different statistical tool one can use based upon the kind of research question he wants to answer. Now coming to the next point, like our presentation topic, inferential statistics. Under inferential statistics, one of the major part I am going to discuss over here will be t-test and as well as ANOVA, because as I was earlier mentioning that due to the time constraint, every inferential statistics cannot be able to handle. So let's actually throw some lights on how t-test can be employed and how to draw conclusion. So this is actually the concept that we can take in a depth manner. Like t-test is one of the statistical procedure. It is one of the most popularly used statistical procedure to test the hypothesis, to compare the differences between the two groups, So hence the t-test can be used in a one sample group or independent sample group or a paired sample groups. So therefore, based on this, we can call it as one sample t-test, independent sample t-test, paired sample t-test. Now what do you mean by a paired sample t-test? Now what do you mean by independent sample t-test? As I was earlier mentioning that, if we have a school, in a school I want to compare the marks of the students of two different sections. In a school we have two sections, section A, section B. I want to compare whether which section performs well in the exam or which section better in terms of academic performance. If a researcher wish to measure the performance of the students comparing the two different sections, so how one can use? Definitely as a simple concept, one can use for a section A, one can measure the percentage of pass, section B percentage of pass, and you can compare which section has a higher number of percentage, the section is actually performing better. This is one way. But when you compare the percentage of pass, but percentage of pass may not give you reality. Why so? Because let us say section A, which consisting all students who are passed in the exam, and all of them are able to score 40 to 45 marks, that's it. Section A consisting all students who have passed the exam, but their scores are actually between the range of 40 to 45. Whereas section B, you have a student where all students are not passed, only 80% students have passed in the exam, but among the 80% there are students who have scored 100 out of 100. Now the question to you, which section is better now? If you consider percentage pass, definitely section A is better because all of them have passed in the exam. In section B, only 80% students have passed. Based on the pass percentage, you can say section A is performing better than the B. But when you take the score of every individual student, section A students are scored between 40 to 45, whereas section B students have scored, some of the students have scored 100 out of 100. Now in terms of highly performance, in terms of high ability is existing in the section B. Therefore, how one can compare such a kind of a scenario? So in such a kind of a scenario, instead of using X bar, instead of using percentage pass, we can use average. So let me measure average marks of section A. Let me measure average marks of section B. Let us compare whether the average marks of section A, average marks of section B, if both are equal to each other. If section A average marks, section B average marks, if both are equal to each other, then I can say that there is no difference in the performance of the students who belongs to section A as well as section B. In terms of performance, the students section A and section B are actually in a similar way, they are performing in the exam. This is where actually I can say null hypothesis. If for example section A average marks, if it is higher than the section B average marks, then I can say that the section A students are performing better than section B. Therefore, to compare two different section, I mean to say section A, section B, the students of section A are entirely drawn randomly. The students of section B, they are also drawn entirely randomly. Then these two samples are independent. In such case, one can use unpaired sample t-test or independent sample t-test. So unpaired or independent sample t-test can be employed whenever you want to compare the average of two groups where the samples of two groups are drawn randomly. So I mean to say the samples do not have influence in the succeeding sample or preceding sample do not have influence on succeeding sample in the process of drawing the sample, then we can employ unpaired sample t-test. Now coming to the next concept, paired sample t-test. When will be using paired sample t-test? Usually paired sample t-tests are used in an experimental intervention. So what do you mean by experimental intervention? So due to the policy implementation, due to some experiment, so there will be change in the structure, as there will be change in the values of the data what we are collecting. For example, let's take same example of a classroom. So we have taken some 100 students. We have taught by using traditional mode of teaching. By using traditional chalk and talk method of teaching, so we are measuring the student performance. Suddenly, the school has come up with the new innovative teaching, the new method of teaching by using ICT enabled tools. Now the question, after implementing the ICT enabled pedagogy teaching, does which influences the student learning ability, does which enhance the performance of the students. Now I want to conclude with the help of my study that by using ICT enabled tools or ICT pedagogy teaching, the ICT pedagogy teaching is able to expand or able to enhance the learning ability or performance of the student, then we can say that yes, all classroom can be enabled by using ICT tools, so that will improve the student performance. If not, then traditional chalk and talk method is also equally similar with the ICT enabled classroom teaching, like the way I can draw conclusion. But the question to us here, how to test it. So now before and after, where before is nothing but before using ICT enabled teaching learning method, and after is nothing but after using ICT enabled teaching. So the intervention is nothing but ICT enabled pedagogy. So by using ICT as intervention, I have a two situation, before situation and after situation. Therefore paired sample t-test is always applied for same group but two different time will be like before the experiment or before the intervention, and after the experiment or after the intervention. So where the sample do not change, because the sample remains same. Before, whoever actually sample were there in the classroom, the same student will be there even after the intervention, even after ICT enabled teaching. Therefore the sample do not vary, the sample remains same in both the condition. Whereas under independent sample, the sample is entirely different, because A section, B section entirely different entity. So in this way paired sample t-test is also used, which help us to measure, help us to draw conclusion for 2x by intervention kind of a study. Now one sample, when do we use one sample? One sample usually used to draw conclusion with respect to one hypothetical value. So what is an hypothetical value? Because based on some theory, based on some other earlier research, there are some of the values which have been accepted universally, some of the values which is accepted in general. Now when you collect data from the one particular sample, you have to ensure that whether my sample is on par with the accepted value or generally accepted value. So let's say, what is the generally accepted value? The pulse rate. So now heartbeat, if I take an heartbeat, so like 60 times, if I say 60 times is a generally or universally accepted heartbeat rate or a pulse rate whatsoever. 60 is a universally accepted value. Now let's say I want to say during the period of time, during the exam, or just 1 hour earlier to the exam, or the student when they enter to the classroom in the examination hall, so their tension will be, they have been tense because of question paper. Now I want to measure whether there will be a variation in the student pulse rate or whether there will be any change in the student heartbeat rate when they enter to the examination hall because to face the exam. So generally, do they have exam phobia? The student, when they have an exam phobia, obviously their heartbeat rate and pulse rate will be much higher than the accepted value. When the student do not have any kind of a phobia, obviously their pulse rate, their heartbeat rate will equivalent or as on par with the universally accepted value. Then here I am comparing the pulse rate or a student's heartbeat rate to the universally accepted a criterion value. So this universally accepted criterion value which is given to you based on some theory, based on some earlier research. So now if any researcher has already have a knowledge about the some of the criterion value, then that criterion values has been accepted, then one has to test whether the samples actually on par with those criterion value, then he can employ one sample t-test. So these are the usage of the three variants of t-test: independent sample t-test, paired sample t-test, and one sample t-test. So when to use t-test, as we are already discussed, when we have only one dependent variable is a function of one independent variable. Under one independent variable, our independent variables are classified into two groups. In such case, we can use our t-test. So this is where actually the t-test comes to our help. Now this is what actually I discussed about one sample t-test, the mileage or employee working hours, like that. Now how to formulate the hypothesis for t-test? So since t-test is basically when you are using one sample t-test, in a one sample t-test, so hypothetical value 60 pulse rate, let us say same example 60 is a value which is accepted universally, and you have a sample, the sample value, the sample average. Now the sample average x bar, whether it is equals to the universally accepted value of 60. So if for x bar the sample value, if it is equivalent to universally accepted value 60, so let me say this as a mu or a test value. If x bar, if it is equals to the test value, here my test value is something like 60. If x bar, the student heartbeat rate, if it is more than 60, if it is equivalent to 60, so then there is no question of phobia. If it is more than 60, obviously there is a question of pulse rate, there is a question of exam phobia. Now the null hypothesis that there is no difference in the student pulse rate as well as universally accepted test value, there is no difference, so this is null hypothesis. But if there is a difference, and contrary to this, yeah, the student pulse rate, the heartbeat rate is higher than the universally accepted value of 60, then we can say it is an alternative hypothesis. If this is proved, then there is no exam phobia. No exam phobia. If this has been proved, yes, there is an exam phobia. So now hypothesis has been formulated null as there is no difference between the sample mean and test value. The sample mean x bar we have to measure, and this is the universally accepted value. And alternative hypothesis, the sample mean is significantly different, or significantly higher, significantly different, significantly lesser than, so whatever, according depends upon your research question. X bar is actually more than the 60. The x bar is nothing but the sample value that we have to measure. Now the t-test again depends upon some of the assumptions, so let us not actually move into those assumptions. So just let us take an example how a t-test can be employed. Now, so I am demonstrating one example by using one of the case study, the dietstudy.sav, to perform one sample t-test in SPSS. So we are using SPSS to demonstrate it. I am using the data file as dietstudy.sav. Assume that the weight of the participants enrolling for a diet program is usually 200 lbs. Now nowadays gym, aerobics, and some diet experimental exercise all are common in urban area due to the change in the lifestyle and change the diet pattern of the people who are in the urban area. Therefore the people, this is one of the experimental study which has been conducted. Some of the people generally join for a diet program, so assuming that their weights are actually more than 200 lbs. So over actually less than 200 lbs, they feel that they are actually comfortable with their body, and even they comfortable with their obesity. They do not have any kind of a morbid obesity, so then they feel that they are comfortable. If anybody they feel that so my body weight is more and I am suffering from morbid obesity, then they will go for diet study to reduce their body weight as well, to reduce their fat. So something like that, they will go for exercises. Now this is an experiment which is conducted where the participants who are enrolling for a diet program, they are assumed to be their body weight will be more than 200 lbs. To test whether the current batch weighs 200 lbs on average, use the variable weight 0 has been considered as a test variable, and test value has been considered 200. Now, so what is been actually, there was a one group where they joined for a program. So now I want to measure whether the group which joined for a program, their average weight is 200 lbs or more than 200 lbs, that I want to measure. So now for this I am using the data file called diet study. Now coming back now, will take SPSS data file, diet study. Yes, as per our slide, it is nothing but we have to use a variable weight 0. So now weight 0, as this is a variable we have. So now going back to variable view, we can say weight 0 is nothing but weight. So how many respondent we have? We have 16 respondent. So pardon, actually I am not showing the demonstration of that, how to enter data, what is the data view, variable view. So because most of the researchers are having knowledge about the basic fundamental sheet of SPSS, then let me skip this. The weight, there are 100 respondents, the 100 respondents weights have been given, 16 respondents, their weight has been given. So this is the weight when they join for program. Now what is my research question? My research question is whether the batch, the 16 participants who are joined for the program, whether their average weight while joining for a program is equal to 200 lbs or something different from 200 lbs. This is what I am comparing, this group value, this entire group average, whether it is more than 200 or something, different from 200. So now to conduct this. Now in SPSS we have analyze menu, where under analyze menu we are comparing the average. Therefore we have an option called compare mean. Under compare mean, one sample t-test, because we are demonstrating, we are testing the hyper with only one particular group. One sample t-test. Under one sample t-test, what is my test variable? My test variable is nothing but weight 0. So weight 0. Let's select the weight 0 and drop under test variable. Now what is our test value? Our test value is that whether the average weight of the 16 students, it is equal to 200 lbs. So 200 lbs is a criterion value or a hypothetical value that I am testing. Therefore I should fix 200 in test value, and along with that, if you want some descriptive statistics, so you can also check those boxes. So let me not go in detail. So let's go for OK. Now once when you press OK, you will be having SPSS output. Our SPSS output appears in a separate window. This window is known as output window, where in this output window you can see the output with something like that. The weight of 16 samples, because our data set which consists in 16 samples, the 16 sample average weight is 198.38 lbs. 198.38 lbs. The standard deviation is 33.472, and this is the standard error of the mean. Now what is our perception, what is our intuition? Our intuition that measuring this average weight, whether this average weight is equivalent to 200 or not. This is what actually our research question or research objective, whether the sample average weight is equal to 200 or not. So when you compare this, So this average weight, what is our average weight? Our average weight is something called 198.38, whether this is equal to 200 or not. So to compare this, we have used our one sample t test. According to our one sample t test, the t value is negative 0.194 with a 15 degree of freedom. The significant value is 0.849. Now the question here, when we use generally the significant value, so the significant value, what we usually call it as significant value, what we usually generally call it as p-value. The p-value, it is always accepted as equal to 0.05 or 0.01. Generally in social science, the p-value we always prefers to have 0.05. If a p-value is less than 0.05, then you can reject the null hypothesis. If a p-value is much higher than the 0.05, you are not rejecting the null hypothesis. So again, so depending upon the p-value, you have to take a call whether the p-value is less than 0.05 or more than 0.5. If a p-value is, so let me take this example. This example we have taken. Now the conclusion, what is my conclusion? If a p-value is less than 0.05, this implies that reject the null hypothesis, reject H0. If a p is more than 0.05, so this is where actually we will be concluding. So now my intention that, so this is my intention, whether my p is less than 0.05. So from our SPSS output, you can see my p value is not less than 0.05. It is more than 0.5. If it is more, we do not reject. So we do not reject the null hypothesis. So do not reject means accept. So generally we call reject and do not reject. Therefore, so we are not rejecting null hypothesis. So we are accepting null hypothesis. What is our null hypothesis? The average weight of the group is equivalent to criterion value. So then I mean to say, the 16 students who are joined for a dietary program, their average weight is similar to the criterion value of 200. It is not so different from 200. It is something equivalent to 200. So in this way one can draw conclusion. So this is about one sample t-test. Now proceeding to the two sample t-test. So here, instead of comparing one sample, we are comparing two groups. So for this, again I am using Dice study. In Dice study, so I am comparing average weight of male and female. So average weight of male and female. So in the previous study, what we have done, we have taken 16 as a whole. Now I will not consider 16 as a whole. Instead of, I will divide the weight of this 16 into male and female. So my purpose here, does the average weight of male and does the average weight of female is equivalent to each other or not? That's what my study basically speaks for. Now how I can split into two groups? So already gender variable is entered in the data sheet, and gender which is being classified in two groups, male and female, and male as coded as 0 and female as coded as 1. Now so I want to split this 16 into the average weight of male and average weight of female, and we want to compare whether the average weight of these two groups are differ significantly or not. So to do that, analyze, compare mean and independent sample t-test. So my test variable is weight, but this weight has been classified into two groups. So what is the grouping variable? Grouping variable is nothing but gender. Select gender and drop under grouping variable. Again under grouping variable gender, we have two groups. One group is male, one group is female. Male has been coded as 0 and female has coded as 1. Again we have to click on define groups, and group number 1 male, that is 0, group number 2 female, that is 1, we have defined in data sheet. Continue. Then if you want to have some statistics, you can take, if not you can skip this, then okay. Now coming back to the output, yes, In my data set there are 9 males and 7 female. I mean to say the diet program, which consisting 16 sample out of 16, 9 are male and 7 are female. The average weight of male is 223.78 lbs. The average weight of female is 165.71. So now from the data, from this descriptive statistics itself, we can conclude that the average weight of male participants is significantly higher. It is very higher than the female average weight. So because they have a weight of 223 lbs and they have a weight of 165.71. So at outset one can say that yes, the average weight of male is higher than female, but it is only through descriptive statistics. But to draw a conclusion, we have to look into the inferential statistical value. So the inferential statistical value is nothing but t value. Again here there are two t values depending upon the equal variance. I mean to say depending upon the assumption of homogeneity. Now I mean to say f value again is insignificant. Whenever f value is insignificant, hence we can say that the assumption of homogeneity is not violated. Assumption as retained. Now the 7.255 with 14 degree of freedom and 7.78, I am just comparing both homogeneity if it is not been homogeneity. In both the cases your t value is more than 1.9. I mean to say your t value is 7.2 or 7.74. Now we have to look the p value. So the p values are 0.00. So earlier I was stated that whenever the p value is less than 0.05, we have to reject the null hypothesis. So whenever the p value is less than 0.05, we have to reject the null hypothesis. Therefore in this case we have to reject the null hypothesis. What is our null hypothesis? Our null hypothesis in this example is our null hypothesis in this case in this independent sample t-test. So our null hypothesis average weight of male is equals to average weight of female. This is my null hypothesis. Now I am rejecting null hypothesis H0 because our p value is less than 0.05. In this way we can use our independent sample t-test to compare two groups average value. Now moving to the next part, the dependent sample t-test. I mean to say experimental intervention. In the experimental intervention again, so the conclusion, the hypothesis what we are drawing here, the same way hypothesis we can write. There is no significant difference between the average value for two groups before and after. Instead of saying independent groups, we are saying before and after the paired observation. Now the same example, diet study. So take an example of weight 0 and weight 4. So weight 0 and weight 4. What do you mean by weight 0? Weight 0 is nothing but before joining the program. Before joining the diet program, what were their average weight, and after joining the dietary program, after doing 4 weeks of exercises, what is their average weight, what is their weight. So now before joining to the program, their weight, and after joining and after conducting 4 weeks of training, 4 weeks of exercise, then what are their weights. So the weight has been captured after 4 weeks of program. Now we are comparing, if a program is very effective, so then their weight must be reduced. If a program is not effective, obviously their weight may not actually fall significantly when compared to their weight prior to the program. Therefore I want to compare, this is before, this is after. So to do that, again analyze, compare mean, paired sample t-test. Under paired sample t-test, yes, we have two value. One is weight 0, that is nothing but before experiment, weight 0, and again weight 4 is after experiment, after dietary program, after 4 weeks training. Now let us say okay. Now from this, so our paired sample t-test, here you can say prior to join to the program, their average weight is 198.38 lbs. After joining to the trial dietary program, so after doing 4 weeks of exercises, physical exercise or whatever dietary habit or dietary program, their average weight has been reduced from 198 to 190.31. So now you can say that before joining to the program their average weight was 198, but after joining to the program their average weight was reduced to 190. So there is a fall in their average weight. So at outside it says that yes, the dietary program is having some effect in reducing their weight, but whether it is significant, that we wanted to check through t value. Our t value in this case, so there is a fall in the weight of 8.063. Yes, there is a fall in 8.063. So this fall, whatever reduction in their average weight, this reduction or this fall in the weight, whether it is significant or not, we have to see the t value and its p value. The its p value is 0.00. Again it is less than 0.05. So what is our conclusion? Whenever the p value is less than 0.05, yes, we have to reject the null hypothesis. As per our example of this, what is our null example? Our null example, a null hypothesis, before and after. So average weight average weight 0 and after. So this is before and after training program, that is after, that is weight we have taken WGT 4 weeks of training program. So now this is after. So if both are equal, obviously, so this is actually our null hypothesis, there is no significant difference. Since our p value is less than 0.0, we are rejecting this. By rejecting this, what are we concluding? The average weight before joining the program is something different from average weight after joining the program. Since from our descriptive statistics, it is already evident that there is a fall in the weight of the training program. Since there is a fall in the average weight, else we can conclude that the training is effective in reducing the weight. In this way one can draw conclusion. Now moving to the next part, ANOVA. Again in ANOVA we are comparing the same average, but not two groups but more than two groups. So to compare the average of more than two groups, we are using ANOVA. So to this I am using the data file of anxiety. Data file of anxiety. The data file of anxiety consisting values where regardless of anxiety level does the number of errors made by the subject changes significantly across the learning trials. So there are 4 trials are there, trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, like that. So this trial, whether these trials are actually independent of number of errors, so that the number of errors always depends upon your learning ability. If you have a less learning, obviously you have a tendency to commit more errors. I have been learned more, then obviously the tendency to commit error will be less. Therefore the number of errors which is depends on the number of the learning ability, the learning tendency, learning intensity. There are 4 trials of learning. So trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, trial 4. We have to say whether the number of errors differ significantly across different trials. So now we have anxiety level, and regardless of anxiety level does the number of errors actually made by. So this is the number trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. So anxiety. So anxiety levels have been classified into 3 groups. The first group, second group, third group. Now let me take one example. What is an example? I will take only trial 1. So and let us compare trial 1 across 3 groups. In the trial 1, the first person has committed 18 errors. The second person committed 19 errors. And again in the first group, the 7th person has committed 16 errors. Now a person with higher anxiety has a tendency to commit more of error. The person with the lower anxiety have a tendency to commit lesser error. So therefore when you see, when the anxiety level of 1 is lower level of anxiety, 2 is a medium level of anxiety, 3 is a higher level of anxiety. So when the person with a higher level of anxiety has a tendency to commit more mistakes or more error. The person with a low level of anxiety has a tendency to commit lesser error. Therefore, now we have to say the number of error is independent of anxiety level. So analyze, compare mean, one way ANOVA. Under one way ANOVA, I will take anxiety, the number of error in the trial 1 as a dependent variable, and anxiety as a factor, because it is 3 factors we have. Under anxiety there are 3 factors: low level, medium level and high level. Then click on option. For the sake of simplicity, let us check the box of descriptive, continue, OK. Now you can see in the first level, the low level anxiety, average level of anxiety at the low level is 16.17, but high level anxiety is actually, so they are having, the average number of errors is 22.67. The low level of anxiety group people, they are committing an average error of 16.17, whereas the higher level of anxiety people, they are committing 22.67 as an error, average error. Now from this you can conclude that yes, there is a difference in the number of errors, the average number of errors between the different anxiety level. However, between 1 and 2 there is no much difference. The number of errors committed by the respondents with a low level anxiety and medium level anxiety, there is no much difference. But whereas when compared to the first and second level of anxiety, I mean to say low and medium, to the higher level, yes, there is a significant difference. So now the significant difference you can conclude by looking into the p-value. ANOVA basically depends upon f-test. Therefore, the p-value of the distribution is 0.041. This is less than 0.05. Yes, you can conclude that there is a significant difference. So you are rejecting the null hypothesis and concluding that the average number of errors is significantly different depending upon the levels of anxiety. In this way, so you can say that so ANOVA is helpful to compare the mean value of more than 2 groups. So in our example, the mean value is actually independent. It is not independent, it depends on level of anxiety. The last part of the presentation is a chi-square. Chi-square basically we use to test the test of independence of the categorical variable. Now in our example, so we have taken 2 categorical variable. The 2 categorical variable in our example, so the data file is automobile save. So let's see the data file of automobile.sav. The performance and location. The performance is nothing but loss, break even and profit. Some of the firms, so they are incurring loss in their business. Some of the firm, they are incurring profit in their business. Some of the firms who are actually in a break even point, no profit, no gain. Now the question here, the performance of the firms in terms of loss or break even or profit, does it depends upon in which country they are be doing business? I mean to say the economic status of the country, the location of the company in the country. So now the countries have been classified, the location of the firm has been classified as, so the company, they are working in low and middle income countries, and the companies which are working in the high income companies, the companies which are actually locating some other one. So now we have been classified into only 2. So now let us actually put them into a cross tabulation and let us find out our chi-square value. The chi-square value is always we use a chi-square test we always use to say to test the hypothesis where 2 variables are categorical. Location is also qualitative variable. Performance also qualitative variable, because both have been classified in terms of groups, low and middle income group and high income group. Performance is classified into loss, break even and profit. So you can use chi-square only when you have a categorical variable which have been having classification of 2 or more than 2. Now first represent this data in a tabular form, like in a cross table. I will take performance as a row or column, location as row. Okay, so let's see the table, how the table looks. Now the table looks like this. We have 45 companies. These 45 companies, out of this 23 companies are functioning from low and middle income countries, and 22 companies are locating or they are functioning from high income countries. In this 23, the 23 company which are in the low and middle income countries, out of these 23, 6 are incurring loss and 12 are making profit. Out of this 22 are functioning from high income. Out of this 22, 9 are incurring profit and 5 are incurring loss. Now from this I can say, does the performance and location of the firm are dependent or independent? So both categorical variable, performance and location, if both these two are independent or dependent, that is what actually my intention to test a hypothesis. Now since location is also classified into two groups, categorical variable, performance is classified into three, that is also categorical variable. Since both the variables are categorical and we are testing whether these two categorical variables are independent or dependent, therefore we can proceed to check the chi-square the similar way how we are run our crash tables. Again, the crash table option you have at statistics. Under statistics, check the box of chi-square. Check the box of chi-square and proceed and continue and proceed to OK. Now the Pearson chi-square test 1.190, its p-value is 0.552. Since the p-value whenever it is more than 0.5, we are not rejecting null hypothesis. So what is our null hypothesis? Both are independent. Performance and location both are independent. So in this way, because our chi-square null hypothesis, location and performance both are independent, and alternative is performance and location both are dependent. In this case, our p-value is more than 0.5, so that we are not rejecting the null hypothesis. So that I mean to say we are accepting null hypothesis. The null hypothesis in this case both are independent. So performance, location both are independent. So this is the brief explanation as well as demonstration of the t-test, ANOVA and chi-square. If you have any query, just drop me a mail so that I can get back to you. I can clarify your doubts. So thank you for the organizers who have organized the program as well as the participants for your active participation. Thank you one and all.